Welcome to the Intercut After Credits Show, the completely sporadic and unscheduled Intercut supplement where we go all in on a piece of TV, movies, or entertainment that people can't cut away from. I am your co-host, Zachary Shevich, and joining me, Liam Neeson left him the plans to pull off his next job. It's Arturo Zurita.
I've been hyping this movie up since Toronto. We have been saying this is the movie that's going to unite all of film Twitter. It seems to be working. Crimes of Grindelwald isn't really helping that out a little bit because people are getting all up in arms for it. But Widows is one of the best of the year.
Yeah, I don't know if enough people have
Financially,
seen it to,
it's not the best of the year.
Be like talking about it negatively, but the people who have seen it are really on board with Widows. I think we are as well. What we do here on After Credits is dive deep on something that we can't stop thinking about it for other people who can't stop thinking about that thing too. That means we'll be talking about anything and everything, including spoilers, so you might want to wait until after you've seen this to watch our segment. Unless that's not your thing, feel free to stick with us. But before we jump into the spoiler zone, let's talk more generally about Widows, the first film that director Steve McQueen has directed since 12 Years a Slave won Best Picture at the Oscars. Widows is a shift for the filmmaker away from the art films he made his name on and into something that's much more commercial while still retaining some artfulness in its direction. Led by Viola Davis, Widows is about a group of women who inherit the debt of their recently deceased criminal husbands and then team up to pull off a robbery themselves. Michelle Williams, Elizabeth Debicki, and Cynthia Erivo round out the crew, and actors like Colin Farrell, Carrie Coon, Tyree Henry, Kaluuya, and Robert Duvall all have roles in this as well. Art, let me start by asking you this. What was the first thing that captured your attention about Widows?
Before watching it or while watching it?
While watching it.
While watching it, I don't know what would have been the first thing, because it's been a bit since I've seen it. Was stuck with like the first thing that I was like, yo, this is the shot right here. Is that shot I've been gushing about with Colin Farrell going from one, and this isn't even really a spoiler. This is a because we'll get to the spoiler part. This is the part where I'm enticing any of you who have not even had this on your radar to see to definitely go watch it, and that's when he's going from one. It's sort of like a rally that's going on the south side of Chicago. It's more of an area where, you know, people, it's not the best part of town, so he's there trying to like help them get jobs, and it just shows you the difference as the camera's just mounted on the car. They get inside the car, you're just hearing them.
No
you
cuts.
Don't even see them. No cuts, and the camera just pans from the left side as you're seeing the town that may not be the best part as it goes over, and it's literally just like a 40-second drive, a left, right. And all of a sudden, you're in this gated community. He gets out of the car, and it's his house. It's his little mansion that he has there, where the heist is going to be taking place. That's how big his house is. And that shot says a lot.
It really underlines this idea that while Colin Farrell, as the politician running for councilman in this neighborhood, while he is living in the neighborhood, he's not living in the same neighborhood. And I think that's something that anybody who's lived in a city, particularly I know from my visits to Chicago, and you must know from living in Chicago, you know, the way that poor areas and rich areas are divided aren't always so far from each other. Sometimes it's really, you can round a corner and it's a completely different area, and it's like a completely different section of people living there. So I think that shot really says a lot about class, about poverty, about so much in America and politics, and it does it with, you know, just a really simple camera move while being mounted on the car. That's where you get that artfulness, that Steve McQueen direction. He knows how to use a long shot, and he knows why to use a long shot, right? You could have easily depicted that same scene with a bunch of cuts, but just showing you how close yet how far these two worlds are makes a huge point in this movie.
It's fantastic. Plus, on top of that, you know, just the actors that he got onto the set before even watching the movie, I was like, all right, this is a stacked cast. He's got, like I said, Henry is coming in as like one of the top actors out there. Viola Davis is already a top actress. I loved what he did with Debicki, because I've always seen her as just in Gatsby.
Yeah, she's very striking.
Right, yeah, and Man from U.N.C.L.E., like there's a little bit of death in there, but the biggest death she had was being stuck in a wall in Cloverfield, the Cloverfield movie.
Yes.
So in this one, she comes in and I'm like, yo, she's up. Like I thought, okay, Viola Davis is gonna lead the pack. She's like, nope, I'm right here. I'm ready all the way
Yeah.
to the end. She gets one of the final scenes as well. So I was like, okay. The way that he turns Daniel Kaluuya as being someone who we were so sympathetic to in a lot of the roles that he's done. He's usually that guy. You know, a lot of directors use his eyes as kind of being like the ones that you get lost into as he's put in this predicament. And in this one, it's like I don't want to stare at you at all.
Yeah, he has those very intense eyes, and in Get Out, it's used as like you see him kind of like sunken and vacant, and in this it's the exact opposite in that he's like in your face.
I was surprised. I didn't think he could be that menacing. This man came in, and I think what does it is he doesn't even stare at the violence that happens. That's scary. You don't even care about it.
He's
he knows
completely unflapped by it. It doesn't even get him to hesitate.
Yeah.
I saw this one tweet that was like, he got out of the Armitage's house and vowed he would never get fucked with again.
Oh, he's making sure that that's happening. But just like the whole progression of the movie and what I said even before leading up to it on how much I hated the trailers. You know, I hadn't seen the movie. I was like, I'm curious to see what the trailers have to offer. I try to avoid them as much as possible. Sometimes it's usually for spoilers. 90% is for spoilers. I know that I had to give a big 5% chunk because they mismarket the movie. Now they're wondering, why isn't this movie doing so great? Why? It's got a bigger budget, so you would think that a lot of it would go to, you know, trying to get word of mouth out there. And the trailers seem to be playing, but I'm looking at the trailers, and the reason it's not enticing people is because that's not the movie I saw.
Yeah, I think when you say it's a movie coming out in the fall, potentially getting Oscar buzz, directed by Steve McQueen and starring Viola Davis, the trailers make a lot of sense, right? It makes it seem like this stark,
takes itself too seriously.
heavy drama. No, just given the things that I said, it's this like heavy-ish drama thing. What it's not preparing you for is that this is basically Ocean's 8.
Better. Ocean's 8, please. Thank you very much. Real quick, someone said you're not allowed to stop comparing every female-driven movie to Ocean's 8 and Ghostbusters.
Right.
No one is comparing this to Ghostbusters. We're comparing it to Ocean's 8 because it is a heist movie. We are giving it the exact same credit I would give a Bond, Kingsman, and any other
you know what?
movie.
I'll compare it to Ocean's 11 if that's better, because it
it's a
it
better
does
Ocean's
have
11
that kind
too.
of
Yeah,
vibe.
it's a better heist movie than a lot of the heist movies that are out there. And the purpose for those trailers wanting to, I don't know who it's trying to bring in, because this is a Thanksgiving movie.
Yeah, I mean, I would assume they're trying to bring in like the prestige crowd or like the awards contender crowd.
It is so pretentious. They made the trailers look so pretentious, and I'm so surprised that it's the complete opposite.
Yeah, because it's a fun movie. There's like several laugh lines in it. Elizabeth Debicki, in general, I think does a lot of very comedic stuff, especially going in and out of the Polish-American accent.
Yep.
I just think it's a shame that more people aren't necessarily aware that this is a fun and interesting movie. I don't want to get too far into the saying it's fun though, because there is a lot of serious stuff that happens. It does take itself very seriously. There are laugh lines, but it's not like a comedy.
But I think the funny parts, even when it's not supposed to be funny, add to when the dramatic scenes happen. So that scene in the trailer where she says, "Where am I supposed to get guns?" and then she says, "Find a way." That's not really how it is in the movie, right? So that was the first thing that stood out to me from the trailer. In the movie, it's more done so, where am I supposed to get guns? It's America. You'll find a place. And then she does, because then it kind of sets the ending of that scene, sets the tone for what the next scene is going to be when she starts playing with the accent, right?
Totally.
And then I think that a lot of the moments as well, there's a specific scene, as we slightly gradually get into spoilers, dealing with the character played by Michelle Rodriguez, where she meets a certain individual who's an architect. And that whole scene, half of the audience found hilarious. The other audience found it crushing. I don't know which way you sway to it. I found it a little bit funny, but then at the same time, I found
it funny.
Right? So a lot of people are finding it funny, and then you realize, you look over and a person's like, "This is a really depressing scene. What are you laughing at? This is horrible for the both of them." And I'm like,
"Yeah,
yes, but that's what makes it so beautiful. Is that the idea that you have moments like this where it's so depressing, you almost laugh."
Yeah.
Only a person like McQueen would be able to jump to this way bigger budget and create something like that, to still make it artsy in the sense that in ways that you don't usually see with these other movies that have the similar budget. The only bad thing that I have against that is I personally felt that the studio giving him that much money made him overly explain some things that I feel McQueen would have never done, and it was very clear that it was for the audience. But I think he balanced it out perfectly. You said it's not a comedy. And I don't think movies that have comedic bits in it automatically makes it a comedy. It's a drama that knows how to use humor at points, and sometimes it's not even supposed to be a funny joke. It's just a moment that gets you to laugh because of how dark it may get, or how close it hits.
Yeah, I mean, I think you know, rather than to say it's like fun or funny, the word is it's entertaining.
Yes.
It's entertaining and captivating throughout.
It's thrilling.
Yes. Okay, so we're going to open this thing up to Widow's spoilers. If you can't handle the truth or you haven't seen this, now is your chance to go and watch a spoiler-free edition of the Intercut podcast. We just went and talked about authorial intent, so make sure you go check out episode 45. Art, I want to ask you about money, crime, police brutality, race, and Chicago politics. Widow's attempts to connect all of this through its plot and characters, but do you feel the movie does a good job of incorporating all of these themes and messages?
Yes, 100%. Part of it could be the fact that I like Gillian Flynn's writing. This is the first time that I really liked the adaptation. It's not even an adaptation. She wrote the script. Yeah. Right? I haven't usually been the biggest fan. I love all of her books.
You prefer her in novel form.
In novel form. Maybe it's the people who she's chosen, but I mean, I know a lot of people like Gone Girl. I prefer the book. A lot of people love Sharp Objects. I'm 2 episodes. I don't know, maybe it's going to completely change. But, yeah, even you. Exactly. And you don't even read the book.
No.
So I felt the same way about it. This is the first time that I've seen her do something. But it's actually her penning the scripts that gets adapted. And I thought it was a fantastic job. One of the things that she does a lot in her books, and you've seen it with Gone Girl, with Sharp Objects, and they made Dark Places. That was complete. Charlize Theron actually adapted. She was in the adaptation for that. That was complete and utter garbage. But she always has that idea of the big city girl comes back, and it's always a writer, comes back to Missouri, where she is from. It's very much based on a lot of her. She lives in Chicago. That is the big city for her. So the fact that she's been living in the city, I was like, all right, she gets it. 100% she gets it. And Steve McQueen saw that, and Steve McQueen chose her to make the movie. Steve McQueen being the one who's very attached to the original TV series, because it's actually a 2-part miniseries that came out in the 80s. They then even made it in 95, like 10 years after the fact, like a follow-up. What happened 10 years after this with a spinoff called She's Out. So it was like she went to jail, then she came out, and then she right away starts planning a heist. Ocean's 8. So that put together, you know, Steve McQueen's directing. He's the one who sought her out to pen the script. And then both of them going around and actually getting involved with how the politics works in Chicago. I love that with Brian's character, as he plays the politician, I want to say his name was Jamal, who goes and is like actually trying to seek out the most influential people in the South Side, which would be preachers. Right. I was like, yes, that is exactly what you're supposed to do. Go to the people who have the power, and that's what'll draw you to get there. And there's like a whole conversation there. My man had 2 cell phones. That pastor had 2 cell phones, right? Like that is a businessman first, and then a shepherd second. They capture all of that. That's why I loved that the shot so much, because I was like, yeah, that is a lot of streets in Chicago where you go from one area to the other. That's how it goes.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. Go ahead.
I'll say for me that I think while it does a really great job of commenting on a lot of these things, I think the politics aspect is maybe the weakest of all of them, if only because it's the most ancillary to the plot. A
lot of people have said that. They said if we're focusing on these widows, why do we have the whole Jamal versus whatever Colin Farrell's character was?
Right. I mean, they do set things in motion, so I don't think they're completely extraneous the way that some people have suggested. I think it's maybe, you know, it's the B story or whatever, so it's not as developed as the A story. And I felt that it was less developed. That doesn't necessarily mean I think it was bad. I just think it was not as fully baked as a lot of the other things that come in the movie.
I still think they were interesting, though.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting, and I thought the scenes were captivating. Yeah. No, not throwaways at all. And like if I was recutting the movie, I wouldn't cut them out.
Yeah, so when you see Daniel Kaluuya doing that thing, when he appears later on, you're like, oh, he's not just like, oh, so he's a henchman. It's like, no, we've seen him do 2 things already.
Right.
They're bad.
I think I'm responding more to the idea that like when Viola and the other widows weren't on screen, I wanted them to be on screen.
Okay,
you know?
That's fair.
And not saying that I didn't enjoy those scenes, I just enjoyed them maybe a little less than the others. But for me, one of the things that really works well subtly is the underlying tension with race that goes on between Viola and her husband in the movie. You know, they have a very traumatic experience that connects them in the movie, and they come from it from different places, her being black and him being white, and you see that it kind of creates a divide in their relationship. And I think that's a very insightful minor note that they could have made a whole movie about if they wanted to, but it's just kind of played in the background of their relationship, which I think is really smart. It's crucial.
It's not like pounded in your head of like, this is what it is. This is the story of Kramer versus Kramer type of thing that's going on. It's just like, oh, this is huge. Like, you're right. That could have been a whole movie. When you get that flashback, you were like, this is a part of this movie? And it adds a whole much more depth to it.
It takes the movie to a much deeper place. So I think that part worked really well for me. And, you know, the way that it does sort of imply how interconnected some illegal activities are with politics, I think maybe was better than the actual like political race itself. But it's still really interesting, and you know, you need that stuff there for those things like the long shot. You need that stuff there to give you the full perspective of the community that they're trying to depict. Because it's not just about these criminals who live in Chicago, but it's these criminals who function within the political system around Chicago. So yeah, even though that's not necessarily my favorite part of the plot, I think it all worked, and I think it all made the movie a lot more substantive.
And it adds to a sequel, possibly. Because that is one thing that she wants to do. She says she wants to flesh out things to maybe have a sequel. So sometimes you plant certain characters there if you want to follow them up later, just like the original miniseries did.
Totally. Okay, so there's one big twist near the end of the movie that we should talk about, in which we find out that one of the widows hasn't actually been widowed.
She lied.
When Liam Neeson shows up to take the money that Viola Davis has just stolen.
Was so good.
Art, what did you think of that twist?
First of all, it came out of nowhere. I'm so invested. I was like, there's not going to be a twist in this movie. That wasn't even in my mind. I was like, that's not the type of movie. But I'm like, oh, wait, it is. Which is the only reason I go back and, like, as bad as I think the trailers are in, like, marketing something else, I think for the people who come in and then are watching are like, oh, this is a lot more, this is different, this isn't the big thriller. You still get that thriller aspect. Even if you go in there and you are blind to the fact, again, watch any Viola Davis interviews, are all fantastic. That woman just spits knowledge. If you ignore that fact of how they approach, like you said, the racial parts of it, and how she's a black woman with Liam Neeson, and that's it. They are just a couple in America. They're a couple in Chicago. There's no added emphasis to it. Making it the norm is what makes it the norm. You're focusing on the politics. You're focusing on, I guess, the gender perspective of especially Michelle Rodriguez and Debicki's character, how what happens when their husbands leave and how they start losing certain things. But if you wanted to ignore all of that, you still get a crazy thriller twist at the end when she goes to visit Carrie Coon's character, who should have been in the movie more.
Yes.
And she sees, what is it, the flask or the particular thing that he was always using? I can't remember what it was, but she sees the item at her house, and she goes, and the dog starts barking, and she realizes he's over there. I was just like, that scene alone, just like the way it was paced, and it was like, wait, no, like, how is he alive? He's not alive, and then he appears.
It's one of those twists that, like, I feel like it hits you from the side, right? Like, you don't feel like you're driving into the twist. You feel like you're driving, and then all of a sudden, no, this movie you thought you were watching is something different.
Yeah. That was just like an extra, I was not seeing that coming, and then it adds a whole nother perspective to it, especially when you lead up to the fact that for Viola's character in particular, she now has to literally overcome this person.
Yeah.
Who has always, I don't want to say held her down, but after the big incident that happened of losing their child, now she knows that she's been used and literally has to take him out.
Yeah, and I think, that's another moment where it's so great to have an actress that's as good as Viola Davis to really play the emotion of that moment, because she has to go through so many different feelings. Have you heard her
interview? She tells you, like, when she's opening a door or she orders food, she is in her mind that person who's ordering food. She was remembering the last time the character ordered food. I was like, oh, damn.
Yeah. I mean, it's the kind of thing that I think could make her a contender for Best Actress. I don't know if it's like she's a front runner at all.
Honored to be nominated.
It's not that type of movie, but she's just so captivating that I think there's a reasonable chance that she could get some love from different awards.
I agree.
So I wanted to also ask you about that twist in the end, because it's a little bit of an interesting thing in that this movie sort of it has Liam Neeson and then says he's gone and then brings him back. Like, I think there's this little like meta quality to the fact that you feel Liam Neeson is when you see Liam Neeson, especially in an action thriller context, you feel he's an immense star. You feel like he's really important.
And then he dies 5 minutes in.
And then he dies 5 minutes in, which is such a rug being pulled from out under you. But I think there's kind of this quality where you can't really forget him. He clearly is on her mind throughout the movie. And I think it's a really intelligent casting decision to give us a character who is going to be so present in our mind. Like, we identify Liam Neeson so quickly, rather than being some kind of anonymous actor who would just be like, oh, that's the dead husband.
It's very true.
We're ready almost for Liam Neeson to show up because he's Liam Neeson.
So when he shows up, you're like, of course, wouldn't put it past this man.
Right, yeah. I mean, of course they're using Liam Neeson.
Yeah.
He's the Taken guy.
Yeah.
I don't know. Any other thoughts on Widows? Perhaps people or things that you think could be in consideration for awards?
I definitely see Viola Davis. I would love to see Debicki get a nomination.
Yeah, let's talk about Elizabeth Debicki. She's really good in this.
I would like her to get one. Go ahead.
No, I mean, I thought she was phenomenal in this. We talked about this earlier, where she feels like she's going to be a supporting character, but really has a lot to do in this movie and carries a lot of the dramatic weight.
No, like, honestly, one of the biggest parts of the missions has to do with her. The ending, when she ends up being the one who gets shot, that has to do with her. Even the ending bit, which I'll touch upon, I know some people have come out wondering, like, okay, that ending when they're at the diner and they come in, and you can see it throughout the entire movie. There's this whole idea of reflections. Viola Davis always looking at herself in the mirror. You know, that's like a big symbolic part of the movie, being able to, like, finally embrace the position that she's in, right? Especially with all the stuff that she's gone through. Some people say that she's not really there. Debicki got shot. Maybe she died. But this is the first time that she's able, as she's sitting there and asks, how are you? That's her embracing the fact that she's lost somebody else but learns to move on. Others would say, and as I would side with, because of what Gillian has said, about wanting to make a follow-up to it, hopefully, is that she is alive. But this is the first time that she's able to overcome Viola Davis's character and finally smile. But just that fact of Viola Davis always being like the fierce one, and this is like the first time she's just like she's at the lowest I've ever seen any of her performances really be. The same thing with Debicki, like we were just saying, to take someone who's always this very posh figure, and the range that she had in this one, I think that's definitely worth a nomination.
Absolutely. Yeah, to talk about that little moment a little bit, I thought that was an interesting interpretation, although I don't necessarily buy it. Like, it seems like it might be from a different movie, and I think the much more significant thing that happens in that last moment is you do finally see Viola Davis break that stressed look on her face. She's finally able to move forward and seem joyful again. And we haven't seen her really experience joy throughout this movie until that final moment. I think it says a lot that we only see like one side of that interaction too. And I think the perspective from inside the restaurant is mostly Elizabeth's perspective. So it'd be a little bit weird to me if she was a reflection or like a ghost of some kind, given the way that the scene was shot.
Right, and it undermines that character as well.
Yeah. But it's an interesting interpretation.
Yeah. I mean, that was for me. I highly recommend this movie. I think more people should be watching it. Hopefully, if anything, if it even doesn't do with all the competition coming out for Thanksgiving weekend, at least when it comes out on DVD, I think it'll give a lot of people a reason to want to check it out, be it on streaming or as a rent it. Yeah,
I think it's... we talked about during our Intercup episode that Green Book is probably like the crowd pleaser coming out over Thanksgiving weekend. I would say that Widows is very much a contender too. It's obviously a very different kind of crowd pleaser, but I think it's really engaging. It's really exciting. I think if people don't want to see something that's maybe a little bit on the sappier side, then Widows is probably going to be the number one choice. So I'm hoping that people... get out there and check it out. That being said, I will say it's my least favorite Steve McQueen movie, or maybe Hunger is. But I think I
Hunger
like
is
12
for
years,
me.
and I think I like 12 years
and
and Shame a bit more.
Yeah.
At least artistically.
Yep. 100%. I agree.
Although this is
I agree.
super entertaining and the easiest entry point for
Easily.
someone who hasn't necessarily seen
And that's the
a Steve
best
McQueen
part,
movie.
giving somebody, a director who's got 3 films under his belt, great films under his belt, lower indie, not as reachable films under his belt, seeing a movie like this, and hopefully some people now know who he is, and then go towards those.
Absolutely. That's all for this edition of After Credits on Intercut. You can catch more from me, Zach Shevich, by following me on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, @ZShevich, or check out my YouTube channel, youtube.com/multiplex show. Art, where can people find more from you?
People can find me at the A to Z Show on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube, along with the Let Me Explain channel, where I already got a video up on this, on why it works. Here we're expanding our thoughts on why it works because more people need to see this. So definitely go check out Widows and check out the Intercut podcast.
Yeah, check out the Intercut podcast. Every episode you can listen to on iTunes, on SoundCloud, on your favorite podcatcher. I like Overcast. And make sure you subscribe not just to the audio podcast, but to the video feed as well here on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/intercutpod, where you can catch our bright smiling faces as we break down the latest in entertainment for all of y'all to go through. Head over to you can find new episodes. You can find new episodes of the podcast every Thursday, and please leave us a comment, like the video, consider heading over to iTunes and leaving us a 5-star review. Also, like our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter pages. All of them are @IntercutPod. Thanks again for tuning in, and until next time, remember, the best thing we have going for us is being who we are, because no one thinks we have the balls to pull it off.
Amen.